The Rayburn House office building's largest hearing room buzzed with tension as the National Security Oversight Committee entered its fourth hour of contentious testimony. Camera lights glared and reporters leaned forward, sensing the building confrontation between Kash Patel, the former Defense Department Chief of Staff, and Representative Jasmine Crockett over classified intelligence protocols. Patel, known for his assertive demeanor, had spent the morning defending controversial intelligence decisions with characteristic intensity, often interrupting committee members mid-question. The exchange with Crockett began similarly, until she responded with something unexpected, methodical precision delivered with remarkable composure. "Mr. Patel," Crockett continued, her voice steady despite the charged atmosphere, "if we could return to the specific language in Section 213 of the Intelligence Authorization Act that governed these decisions." She displayed the exact statutory text on the chamber screens and walked through a detailed legal analysis that addressed the heart of the intelligence controversy without political grandstanding. As she completed her analysis, Patel leaned forward, his expression shifting from defensive to attentive. The room fell silent, waiting for his response. "Representative Crockett," Patel began, genuine surprise evident in his voice. "In all my years testifying before Congress, I've rarely encountered such precise understanding of intelligence protocols. Your analysis of statutory authority is exactly right. These distinctions matter tremendously in operational contexts." He paused, visibly reassessing his approach. "The composure and legal precision you've demonstrated today represents exactly the kind of substantive oversight our intelligence community needs, regardless of political differences." The audience, composed of intelligence professionals, journalists, and public observers who had witnessed countless partisan exchanges, erupted into spontaneous applause, not for a political victory, but for a moment of genuine professional respect that transcended the usual divisions. What transpired in the next few minutes wasn't just an unexpected acknowledgement. It was a powerful demonstration of how substantive expertise and calm professionalism could still bridge America's deepest political divides. If you appreciate moments when expertise and composure replace partisan conflict in our political discourse, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content that highlights substance over spectacle in American governance. To understand why Patel's recognition of Representative Crockett's intelligence expertise resonated so deeply, we need to examine their professional backgrounds and the complex national security issue they were addressing. Kash Patel had built his reputation through a career spanning critical national security positions. After serving as a terrorism prosecutor at the Department of Justice, he moved to the National Security Council and later became Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, gaining first-hand experience with the nation's most sensitive intelligence operations. Patel's background gave him intimate knowledge of intelligence protocols few possess outside the classified community, noted Dr. Elizabeth Richards, a national security analyst. His direct operational experience made him a formidable witness in oversight hearings, often able to outmaneuver legislators on technical details. Known for his forceful advocacy and uncompromising style, Patel had earned respect in national security circles for his deep operational knowledge, even as his confrontational approach in congressional hearings sometimes generated controversy. His testimony typically featured assertive defenses of intelligence decisions, often challenging committee members' understanding of classified procedures. Representative Jasmine Crockett had followed a different path to the Oversight Committee. Before entering Congress, she had established herself as an accomplished attorney specializing in complex federal cases. Her legal career had included work on cases involving classified information, giving her unusual familiarity with intelligence protocols for someone outside the intelligence community. "What distinguished Representative Crockett from many colleagues," explained former intelligence official James Wilson, "was her approach to oversight. Rather than using hearings for political messaging, she immersed herself in the technical details of intelligence operations and the legal frameworks governing them." Since joining the Oversight Committee, Crockett had surprised observers by focusing intensely on the statutory foundations of intelligence activities rather than their political implications. She had gained notice among intelligence professionals for her detailed questions about operational procedures and legal authorities, areas where congressional oversight often lacked precision. The specific issue before the committee involved a complex dispute about intelligence sharing protocols between agencies during a sensitive foreign operation. The technical nature of the dispute involved classification procedures outlined in Section 213 of the Intelligence Authorization Act, a provision so specialized that few outside the intelligence community fully understood its operational implications. The hearing had begun with familiar partisan patterns. Democratic members emphasized transparency concerns, while Republican members focused on operational necessities. The questions often reflected political messaging rather than substantive oversight of intelligence activities. Patel's testimony had followed a similar pattern, with assertive defenses of operational decisions and occasional dismissiveness toward committee members he perceived as lacking technical understanding. The atmosphere had grown increasingly tense as the morning progressed. The challenge in intelligence oversight, noted former NSC official Thomas Richardson, is bridging the gap between classified operational details and public accountability. This requires both technical knowledge and an ability to communicate complex issues clearly, a rare combination in congressional hearings. Crockett had spent weeks preparing for this hearing, studying not just the public aspects of the controversy, but the specific statutory language governing intelligence protocols. Rather than approaching it as a political opportunity, she had consulted with intelligence professionals from previous administrations to understand the operational context behind the disputed decisions. What made Representative Crockett's approach different, explained intelligence law expert Dr. Maria Hernandez, was her focus on the actual mechanics of intelligence operations rather than their political implications. She approached oversight as a substantive examination of how systems function rather than an opportunity for political positioning. This substantive focus would prove crucial in the exchange that was about to unfold, a rare moment when professional expertise transcended political divisions to create genuine dialogue about national security operations. We're curious about your thoughts on what makes for effective congressional oversight of sensitive government functions. Share your perspectives in the comments. Your insights help us identify more stories of substantive leadership worth highlighting. The National Security Oversight Committee hearing had been convened to examine disputed intelligence protocols during a multinational counterterrorism operation. The classified nature of many details created an additional layer of complexity, with witnesses and committee members carefully navigating what could be discussed in the public session. The morning had featured several tense exchanges between committee members and Patel, whose responses had grown increasingly impatient as questioners pressed on political aspects of the operation without engaging with technical details. "Respectfully, Congressman," Patel had responded to one line of questioning, "that characterization fundamentally misunderstands how SIGINT collection authorities function in multinational contexts. These aren't discretionary decisions. They're governed by specific statutory language and executive orders that outline precisely when and how information can be shared." His frustration was evident as similar questions continued, with committee members often talking past his technical explanations to focus on broader political narratives. When Representative Crockett's questioning time arrived, the hearing room had already settled into a predictable pattern of partisan framing and defensive responses. Observers prepared for another round of the same, particularly given Crockett's reputation as a progressive legislator. She began differently, however, immediately signaling a substantive focus. "Mr. Patel, I'd like to focus specifically on the statutory authority governing intelligence sharing in this operation," Crockett said, her tone measured and professional. "Before asking my questions, I want to ensure we're working from the same textual understanding." She directed attention to a display screen showing Section 213 of the Intelligence Authorization Act, with specific subsections highlighted. This provision creates 3 distinct categories of intelligence products with different sharing protocols, she continued. "I'm particularly interested in how your team interpreted subsection C2 regarding derived intelligence with restricted distribution channels in the context of this operation." Patel shifted forward slightly, his expression registering surprise at the technical precision of her framing. He began to answer with his typical assertiveness, but then modulated his tone to match her professional approach. Representative Crockett, you've identified the exact provision that governed our decision-making, he acknowledged. Subsection C2 creates specific requirements for intelligence derived from sensitive sources that can't be immediately disclosed to all operation partners. What followed was a detailed exchange about the technical aspects of intelligence classification and sharing, the kind of substantive oversight rarely visible in public hearings. Crockett asked specific questions about how particular intelligence products were categorized and what protocols determined their distribution to different agencies and international partners. When Patel explained a particularly complex aspect of source protection, Crockett demonstrated unexpected technical understanding. So to clarify, she said, when human sources contribute to signals analysis, the derived intelligence inherits the more restrictive distribution limitations unless declassified through the procedures in Executive Order 13526, Section 3.1d. Patel paused, clearly reassessing his initial assumptions about her expertise. That's precisely correct, Representative, he replied, his tone shifting from defensive to collegial. The interaction between human source protection and derived intelligence creates complex classification requirements that many overlook. As their exchange continued, the atmosphere in the hearing room transformed. What had begun as an adversarial questioning became something closer to a professional consultation between intelligence experts. Committee members from both parties leaned forward with interest as the discussion illuminated technical aspects of intelligence operations rarely explained clearly in public settings. Halfway through her allotted time, Crockett shifted to the central question that had prompted the hearing. Mr. Patel, the core dispute appears to be whether the intelligence in question fell under subsection C2 or C3, with significantly different sharing requirements, she noted. Based on the unclassified parameters, what specific factors determined your categorization decision? It was the same substantive question others had attempted to ask, but framed in technical language that engaged directly with operational realities rather than political implications. Instead of becoming defensive, Patel responded with detailed explanation of the classification factors. The primary determination involves source exposure risk, he explained. When intelligence can be traced back to its collection method through technical fingerprints, we're required by statute to apply C2 protocols even when the content itself might seem appropriate for wider distribution under C3. He continued with a technical explanation that illuminated the genuine complexity behind what had been portrayed as a political dispute. Crockett listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated her grasp of the subject matter. When she identified a potential procedural issue in how certain intelligence had been categorized, she raised it without accusation or political framing. It appears the determination process may have bypassed the interagency review required under subsection F, she noted. Was there a specific operational necessity that justified this procedural modification? Rather than becoming defensive, Patel acknowledged the procedural question as legitimate. You've identified a genuine process concern, he conceded. The timeline compression during the operation's critical phase led to modified procedures that, in retrospect, should have included better documentation of the necessity determination. That's a fair point about procedural compliance. This acknowledgement, a national security official conceding a legitimate oversight concern rather than deflecting, created a palpable shift in the hearing room. Committee members who had been checking phones or preparing partisan questions were now engaged with the substantive discussion unfolding before them. Crockett continued with precise questions about how similar situations might be handled differently in future operations, maintaining her focus on procedural improvements rather than political advantage. Would a standby interagency review capability with pre-cleared personnel address the timeline concerns while maintaining statutory compliance? She asked, suggesting a practical solution rather than simply identifying problems. Patel considered this thoughtfully. That's actually a constructive suggestion that would address both operational needs and oversight concerns. The pre-clearance approach could significantly improve compliance without compromising operational tempo. As Crockett's time neared its end, she returned to the core statutory question with remarkable clarity. "Mr. Patel," she continued, her voice steady despite the charged atmosphere, "if we could return to the specific language in Section 213 of the Intelligence Authorization Act that governed these decisions." She displayed the exact statutory text again on the chamber screens and walked through a detailed legal analysis that addressed the heart of the intelligence controversy without political grandstanding. The distinction between restricted distribution channels in subsection C2 and limited distribution protocols in subsection C3 creates an understandable area of interpretation. However, the statutory construction principles in subsection A suggest that source protection must take precedence when these provisions conflict. Her analysis demonstrated not just technical understanding, but a genuine engagement with the legitimate challenges intelligence professionals face when implementing complex statutory requirements in real-world operations. As she concluded, Patel's expression had transformed from his earlier defensive posture to one of professional respect. The room fell silent, awaiting his response to this unexpected display of substantive oversight. As Representative Crockett concluded her detailed analysis of the intelligence statute, the hearing room remained unusually quiet. The technical precision of her questions had shifted the atmosphere from political confrontation to substantive dialogue about complex national security procedures. Patel adjusted his microphone, his expression thoughtful rather than combative. Those familiar with his typical testimony style noted the significant change in his demeanor. "Representative Crockett," he began, genuine surprise evident in his voice, "in all my years testifying before Congress, I've rarely encountered such precise understanding of intelligence protocols. Your analysis of statutory authority is exactly right. These distinctions matter tremendously in operational contexts." He paused, visibly reassessing his approach. "The composure and legal precision you've demonstrated today represents exactly the kind of substantive oversight our intelligence community needs, regardless of political differences." The audience, composed of intelligence professionals, journalists, and public observers who had witnessed countless partisan exchanges, erupted into spontaneous applause, not for a political victory, but for a moment of genuine professional respect that transcended the usual divisions. The committee chairman, momentarily surprised by this unprecedented response, gently called for order while acknowledging the unusual nature of the moment. As the applause subsided, Patel continued with a level of candor rarely seen in oversight hearings. "If I may elaborate on your statutory analysis," he said, "you've correctly identified the tension between subsections, C2 and C3, that created genuine implementation challenges during this operation. Intelligence professionals were navigating competing requirements under significant operational pressure." Rather than using this acknowledgement as an excuse, Patel accepted the legitimacy of congressional oversight while explaining the operational context. "Your suggestion about standby interagency review capabilities addresses precisely the procedural gap we encountered," he noted. "That kind of constructive oversight improves our operations rather than simply criticizing decisions made under difficult circumstances." What followed was even more remarkable. Instead of moving immediately to the next questioner, the chairman recognized the unique value of the substantive exchange unfolding before them. "Given the technical nature of this discussion," the chairman suggested, "perhaps we could extend Representative Crockett's time to fully explore these procedural improvements." Members from both parties nodded in agreement, recognizing that the substantive dialogue was providing valuable insights beyond what typical questioning had yielded. With additional time, Crockett and Patel engaged in a detailed discussion of how intelligence sharing protocols might be improved while maintaining necessary protections for sensitive sources and methods. Their exchange highlighted genuine areas of agreement about procedural reforms that could enhance both operational effectiveness and appropriate oversight. "What's striking about your approach," Patel observed, "is that you're engaging with how these systems actually function rather than how they might be portrayed politically. That's extraordinarily valuable for those of us who have to implement these requirements in complex operational environments. Crockett acknowledged the legitimate challenges intelligence professionals faced. These aren't simple questions, she responded. Balancing operational necessity with appropriate safeguards requires genuine expertise and careful judgment. Our oversight should acknowledge that complexity, while still ensuring proper procedures are followed. As their extended exchange continued, committee members from both parties began engaging with the substantive issues rather than preparing partisan talking points. Several asked technical follow-up questions that built upon the analytical framework Crockett and Patel had established. Representative Michael Johnson, known for his conservative positions, directed a question to both Crockett and Patel. Based on your exchange about interagency review processes, he asked, what specific statutory modifications would create clearer guidance for time-sensitive operations while maintaining appropriate oversight? This question, focused on constructive improvements rather than political positioning, exemplified how the tone of the entire hearing had transformed. Crockett and Patel each offered substantive suggestions, finding significant common ground despite their different institutional roles. Even more remarkably, representatives began acknowledging limitations in their own understanding and asking genuine questions to improve their oversight capabilities. I've served on this committee for 6 years, admitted Representative James Wilson, and I now realize I've never fully understood the interaction between Executive Order 13526 and statutory classification requirements. Could you clarify how those authorities work together in practical implementation? This admission, a congressional overseer acknowledging knowledge gaps rather than posturing, reflected the atmosphere of substantive engagement that had replaced the usual political theater. As the extended questioning concluded, Patel made a statement that stunned many in the hearing room. Madam Chairman, he said, in light of Representative Crockett's substantive analysis, I'd like to commit to providing this committee with a detailed procedural review addressing the specific statutory questions she raised. Her technical understanding deserves an equally substantive response that can improve both operations and oversight. This voluntary commitment to increased transparency, from an official who had begun the hearing with a defensive posture, demonstrated the power of substantive engagement to transform institutional relationships. Crockett responded with equal professionalism. I appreciate that commitment, Mr. Patel. Effective oversight isn't about scoring political points, but about ensuring our intelligence activities operate within appropriate legal frameworks while maintaining operational effectiveness. As the chairman finally moved to the next questioner, the hearing room maintained the unusual atmosphere of substantive focus. Rather than returning to partisan talking points, subsequent questions built upon the technical understanding Crockett had demonstrated, with members from both parties engaging with the actual mechanics of intelligence operations rather than their political implications. The remainder of the hearing continued with this transformed tone, less focused on partisan positioning and more on substantive understanding of complex intelligence functions. Even representatives who typically used their questioning time for political messaging adjusted their approach, asking more technically informed questions about statutory implementation. A veteran intelligence correspondent was overheard remarking to a colleague, "In 20 years covering these hearings, I've never seen one shift from political theater to substantive dialogue like this." Her composure completely reset the entire dynamic. The C-SPAN cameras captured the moment when Crockett, gathering her materials as another representative began questioning, received notes of appreciation from committee members on both sides of the aisle, an acknowledgement that her approach had elevated the entire proceeding beyond partisan divisions to focus on the substantive oversight responsibility they all shared. In the days following the National Security Oversight Committee hearing, the exchange between Representative Crockett and Kash Patel became the subject of unusual attention in both political and intelligence circles. Rather than the typical partisan framing, commentary focused on the substantive nature of their dialogue and its implications for congressional oversight. Yesterday's exchange demonstrated what effective oversight actually looks like, wrote national security analyst James Richardson. When technical understanding replaces political positioning, both democratic accountability and operational effectiveness are enhanced. Intelligence professionals, typically wary of congressional oversight, noted the difference between Crockett's approach and the political theater that often characterized hearings. What made Representative Crockett's questioning valuable, observed former CIA operations officer Emily Chen in a professional journal, was her engagement with the actual mechanics of intelligence classification rather than using the hearing for political messaging. This kind of substantive oversight improves operations rather than simply generating headlines. The impact extended beyond commentary. 2 weeks after the hearing, Patel delivered on his commitment to provide a detailed procedural review addressing the statutory questions Crockett had raised. Rather than the typical minimalist response to congressional inquiries, the document provided substantive analysis of how classification procedures had functioned during the operation and identified specific areas for procedural improvement. The Patel response represents an unprecedented level of substantive engagement with congressional oversight concerns, noted Dr. Thomas Wilson of the Center for Intelligence Studies. Its technical specificity and concrete reform proposals suggest a genuine commitment to procedural improvements rather than merely defending past actions. More significantly, the committee itself began to operate differently. Members from both parties, recognizing the value of Crockett's technically informed approach, invested more in understanding the operational details of programs they oversaw. Staff briefings increasingly focused on statutory frameworks and implementation challenges rather than political implications. Representative Michael Johnson, who had served on the committee for 8 years, acknowledged this shift during a closed-door session. The Crockett-Patel exchange revealed gaps in our collective understanding of these systems, he noted to colleagues. If we're serious about our oversight responsibility, we need to engage with these programs as they actually function rather than as they're portrayed politically. The committee chairman established a bipartisan working group specifically focused on improving intelligence sharing protocols, with Crockett serving as one of its leaders. Their work emphasized practical improvements that could enhance both operational effectiveness and appropriate safeguards. What distinguishes this working group, noted former NSA Director Admiral James Harrison, is its focus on how these systems actually function rather than political abstractions. They're asking the right questions about implementation challenges that practitioners recognize as genuine rather than manufactured controversies. The professional intelligence community, initially skeptical of increased congressional engagement, found the working group's approach constructively different from typical oversight. They're asking questions that demonstrate actual understanding of our operational constraints, remarked a senior intelligence official who worked with the group. When oversight is informed by technical knowledge rather than political narratives, it can genuinely improve our processes rather than simply impeding operations. 6 months after the hearing, the working group produced bipartisan recommendations for intelligence sharing reforms that received support from both intelligence agencies and civil liberties advocates, a rare alignment typically prevented by partisan positioning. The proposed reforms address genuine operational needs while strengthening appropriate safeguards, noted the general counsel of a major intelligence agency. They reflect an understanding of the practical challenges in implementing statutory requirements in complex operational environments. Law schools began incorporating videos of the Crockett-Patel exchange into courses on national security law and congressional oversight, using it to illustrate effective questioning techniques and substantive engagement with complex statutory frameworks. In teaching oversight functions for 15 years, I've rarely found material that so clearly demonstrates how technical precision can transcend political positioning, explained Professor Elena Rodriguez of Georgetown Law. We now use this exchange to show students how substantive knowledge transforms the oversight relationship from adversarial to constructive. Intelligence professionals noted changes in how agencies prepared for subsequent hearings, with greater emphasis on substantive engagement with technically informed questions rather than simply avoiding political traps. The Crockett Standard has changed our hearing preparation, acknowledged one agency legislative affairs director. We now anticipate more technically sophisticated questions and prepare witnesses to engage substantively rather than defensively. The long-term impact became evident as other committee members began adopting similar approaches to oversight, investing in technical understanding rather than focusing exclusively on political implications. This shift gradually transformed the committee's culture from primarily adversarial to more constructively engaged with the programs it oversaw. 1 year after the hearing, a comprehensive intelligence authorization bill included specific statutory language addressing the ambiguities Crockett had identified in Section 213. The revised provisions, drafted with input from both intelligence professionals and oversight experts, created clearer guidance for time-sensitive operations while maintaining appropriate safeguards. This statutory refinement directly addresses implementation challenges that operational personnel have struggled with for years, noted the General Counsel of a major intelligence agency. It demonstrates how informed oversight can improve rather than impede intelligence functions. At a national security conference marking the legislation's passage, both Crockett and Patel participated in a panel discussion on effective oversight relationships. Their thoughtful engagement, focused on substantive improvement rather than political positioning, provided a model for constructive dialogue between oversight bodies and operational agencies. What I've learned through this process, Patel reflected, is that technical precision in oversight questions elicits substantive responses rather than defensive posturing. When representatives engage with how systems actually function rather than how they might be portrayed politically, the entire oversight relationship becomes more productive. Crockett nodded in agreement. Effective oversight requires understanding the legitimate operational challenges agencies face while ensuring appropriate safeguards. When we focus on substantive improvement rather than political advantage, we serve both democratic accountability and national security. The moderator asked about the moment of spontaneous applause that had followed their initial exchange, a reaction virtually unprecedented in congressional hearings. I believe that response reflected a collective recognition of something important, Patel suggested. Both intelligence professionals and oversight bodies share a fundamental commitment to effective national security operations conducted within appropriate legal frameworks. When we engage substantively rather than politically, that shared commitment becomes visible despite our different institutional roles. Crockett added a perspective that resonated beyond the immediate national security context. The composure that Mr. Patel noted wasn't simply about temperament, she explained. It reflected a commitment to engaging with complex issues based on their substance rather than their political utility. When we approach governance with technical precision and institutional respect, we create space for genuine dialogue that partisan positioning prevents. As the conference concluded, a senior intelligence official who had initially been skeptical of increased congressional engagement approached Crockett with an observation. "Your approach has changed how many of us view the oversight process," he acknowledged. "When representatives demonstrate genuine understanding of operational complexities rather than using hearings for political theater, we see oversight as potentially constructive rather than merely restrictive." The story of Patel's recognition of Crockett's technical precision offers a powerful reminder that effective governance requires more than political positioning. It demands substantive engagement with how systems actually function. Their exchange demonstrated that even in highly charged policy areas, technical understanding and composure can create space for genuine dialogue across institutional and political divisions. If you found value in this exploration of substantive oversight, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. In a media environment often dominated by political conflict, we remain committed to highlighting examples of how technical knowledge and professional composure can bridge divisions and improve governance. America's national security challenges require both effective operations and appropriate democratic oversight. The Crockett-Patel exchange reminds us that addressing these challenges effectively requires not just advocacy for particular positions, but the kind of technically informed engagement that can improve systems regardless of which party holds power. In your own engagement with complex policy questions, consider how you might apply the lessons from this remarkable exchange. Focusing on substantive understanding rather than political positioning, approaching differences with composure rather than combativeness, and recognizing that improvement often emerges from dialogue between different perspectives, united by shared commitment to effective governance.